Hey everybody, welcome back to the Saltworks podcast. I'm your host, Hallie Dye, and today we have a beautiful soul on the podcast. Britten Lightsey is here sharing her story with us about going through tragedy at a young age and how it left her feeling alone and with this deep desire to find a place of belonging. She shares with us her battle of identity, her anger over the hardships she faced, and seasons of depression, but she brings great news to each thing she's faced. I cannot wait for you to hear it. But before we jump into that conversation, I want to share with you a few partners that we have for today's episode. If you're in need of lawn service or maintenance, you need to check out Lightsey Lawn Service. Whether you need care in residential or commercial property, Lightsey Lawn Service has got you covered. They offer many different services, including small tree trimming, gutter cleaning, pressure washing, leaf cleanup, landscaping, and more. They proudly serve Monroe, West Monroe, and all surrounding areas. So give them a call today at 504-439-7186 to get started with Lightsey Lawn Service and keep your lawn looking good all year long. We don't think about medical decisions until they're upon us. When we're in need of an x-ray or scan, researching where to go is the last thing on your mind. That's why you need to know about Northeast Imaging. Northeast Imaging is a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor-trusted and patient-preferred. They offer MRI, CT, X-ray, and ultrasound. They have a friendly staff who is committed to focus on high-quality scans and intentional care to the patient. Plus, they're preferring providers. And listen, it doesn't even matter if you're using your health insurance or you're paying cash. Northeast Imaging is almost always more affordable than local hospitals. The facility is conveniently located at 1703 Lamy Lane in Monroe. They're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., so tell your healthcare provider you want to go to Northeast Imaging. Whether it's work, school, or extracurriculars, I know life can feel like a blur. It's January, you're trying to get your new systems in order. We don't always have time to meal plan or prep. Not to worry, Daily Press has got you covered. Daily Press is a family-owned business that has fast and friendly service for your busy schedule with their made-to-order deli options for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They also have their fresh grab-and-go options in the open-air cooler and hot-to-go box. What you may not know is they even have a wide variety of frozen take-home meals and appetizers for your craziest days. And we can't forget all the baked good options and fresh brewed coffee. Daily Press has 4 locations, making it convenient for you and your family, and are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at all but one location. So stop by Daily Press today. And now for my conversation with Britten. Well, Britten, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm so honored to be here.
Well, it's really fun to have you, and we're honored to have you. I know that it's nerve-wracking to share your story, well, to talk on a microphone at all, but your story, like, when you're sharing your story over teaching per se, like, there's just something so vulnerable about that,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for being willing, because it's good, and I'm excited to be a part of sharing it.
I'm honored to be here.
Well, thanks. So, who is Britten Lightsey for people who don't know you?
Who's Britten Lightsey? So, first and foremost, I am a follower of the way, the truth, and the life, which is Jesus Christ. I am a daughter of the King of Kings. I'm a wife to Dustin.
Mm-hmm.
I am a mother of 2 boys who are full of so much joy and life and energy.
Yes. And they're
but
close together, right?
Oh, 11 and a half months close.
Yeah. That's part of your story, I know, but
Yes. Not planned, but looking back, we wouldn't have it any other way.
when I had Garnet, so Garnet and Bear are 19 months apart, so not quite as close, but still close. And I think it was the anesthesiologist, somebody making around the next morning was like, "Is this your first?" And they said something like, I said, "No, we have a 19-month-old," and he was like, "That's the age difference between our first 2," and we said never again. So our third one was 11 months after. I'm like, "Oh, don't tell me that today."
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I'm sure now, like, you can't imagine life
No,
any different.
It was definitely something to walk through, looking at a positive pregnancy test and my 4-month-old from the bouncer next to me.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. But I mean, so fun now.
Mm-hmm.
So you were born in New Orleans.
I was born in New Orleans. I lived in a small town outside New Orleans for about a third of my life. And then eventually we moved up to Monroe because of Hurricane Katrina. So when we moved here, I was 11.
Okay, gotcha.
Mhm.
Did you live in New Orleans or outside of?
It was a little town called, Chalmette outside
Okay,
of New Orleans,
gotcha. Yeah.
St. Bernard Parish.
Did y'all go into New Orleans much or?
A little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah.
Back then, the town that we lived in kinda had everything we needed.
Yeah.
Now not so much, but,
Yeah.
it's definitely
Mm.
different now than it was before Katrina.
Yeah, it is. It really
Mhm.
is. I can second that. I mean, I didn't live nearby, but just visiting even.
Mhm.
Um, Tell us about your childhood.
I was born to Marlene and Glenn Hilkirk.
Mhm.
My dad was an alcoholic. I was a lot of times when you say alcoholic, everybody automatically assumes like bad dad or anything, but I have
Mhm.
a lot of good memories with my
Yeah.
dad. I do have some not so great ones, but he
Yeah.
eventually got really sick because of his alcoholism, and then he
Yeah.
passed away when I was 8.
Mm.
Um, and the next couple of years of my life are kind of a blur. I think this was like my first like dip into depression
Mm.
at 9 years old. My mom really saw that I was struggling, and eventually put me into therapy.
Yeah. What
Um,
did she see in you that was like, okay, we need to do something?
so I was pretty just a happy kid. But
Yeah.
then after going through that grief at 9 years old, I became didn't speak that much.
Mhm.
You can just kind of see that my spirit was kind of not what it used to be.
Yeah. Mm.
Mm.
I love that you drew the distinction that the assumption of what having an alcoholic father looks like and can look like isn't
Mhm.
always the case.
Yeah.
Like you had a good dad
Mhm.
who had alcoholism,
Mhm. Yeah.
which is, I think, so important because it can be where addiction like takes over the personality, but
Yeah.
it's not the person.
Mhm. Yeah. I have
So,
lots of good memories with him. I actually spent most of my time with him.
yeah.
My mom worked and he was on disability, so a lot of my time was just with him.
Mm. That had to have been a huge life change for you,
Mhm.
like the grieving of your father, but also like pretty much your stay at home parent. I
Mhm.
mean, what did it look like for you shifting after that?
Um, it was kind of a blur.
Mm.
Right after my dad passed, we ended up moving in with my grandparents, and it was because a couple months after my dad passed, my mom got diagnosed with a rare form of reproductive organ cancer.
No.
So she is walking this out with me and just lost her husband, and then she gets diagnosed with cancer. So the next 2 years are kind of like they're a blur and all over the place.
Mm.
I have a lot of memories of. I don't think I knew what
Yeah.
was going on with my mom
Yeah.
because just as selfless as she was, she kept it from me because she
Hmm.
saw what I was already walking through and just couldn't bring this to me too. But I have memories. We moved in with my grandparents because she couldn't like get out of bed or take
Mm.
care of me. I remember going to the hospital often. I remember her like being in pain. I even remember her and her best friend like in her kitchen, like shaving her head because she was losing it from the chemo.
Mm.
But that transition from like my dad,
Yeah.
because I had so many memories of my dad. I had memories of my mom when I was little,
Hmm.
but not as much as my dad.
Yeah.
And then it came that shift to my mom kinda.
Mm.
And it was after my dad had passed. It kind of felt like one thing after another. Like
Right.
she gets sick and then she eventually goes into remission and then Hurricane Katrina happens and then we are in Monroe.
Wow.
And there's a lot of other things in there too, like my grandpa passed away, who helped raise me when we were living with them.
Yeah.
A bunch of other things in there, but
Well,
yeah.
and how old are your boys now?
They are 5 and 4.
Can you imagine, like, I'm sure you have like somewhat of a routine for boys. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe bedtime gets pushed back 30
Mm-hmm.
minutes to an hour in the holidays, but like you probably have a certain routine that y'all do if you're home.
Mm-hmm.
And like, do you see the differences in
Yeah.
them when you're not on that routine? Or like you
Mm-hmm.
have had the holidays and you're going and,
Mm-hmm.
staying up late and whatever. And like they're 5 and 4, but like this is like your experience from 8 to what'd you say, 11
Mm-hmm.
with like constant change,
Mm-hmm.
and like just how difficult that is. Like it's not easier just because you're older,
Yeah.
And so, like, I can understand you being like, honestly, it was a blur
Yeah.
because it was kind of like it wasn't routine, like those memories you could remember with your dad of the everyday. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
definitely.
Yeah, man, that's hard. That's hard for 40-year-olds,
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine. So you did y'all evacuate before the hurricane?
So it's a funny story because my mom actually didn't know about Katrina like coming, and she did not know about the hurricane at all
Wow.
until like I think it was either the night before or 2 nights before, and she's on the phone with her brother, and he's like,
Yeah.
"So when are y'all leaving?" And she was like, "Leaving for what? What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Marlene, there is a Category 5 hurricane head straight for us.
Yeah.
You got to go." So we packed up. Um, I want to say it was the morning before Katrina like actually hit land.
Wow.
And then we went to my grandparents' house, packed them up, and they did not want to leave. They had experienced all kinds of hurricanes, so they were
Right.
like, "We're not leaving. This is fine. We're going to be fine."
Yeah.
My mom eventually got them up and moving, and what usually is like a 4.5 hour drive was like I think 8 or 9 to get
Wow.
up here.
Yeah. Because traffic or just
Yeah,
like, yeah.
traffic. Yeah, getting out.
Wow. And you can think like, like if you're in like, wow, she didn't know about Hurricane Katrina, but like how many times I'm like, it's supposed to storm today? Like, I mean, like that is me,
Yeah.
and like she was in like pure survival mode at
Yeah.
that point,
Hmm. Yeah. I think about
Wow.
how much I don't watch the news. I'm like, that totally would have been me. Like,
Yeah,
what are you talking
absolutely.
about?
We have so much more like avenues to hear the news, and I still don't
Yeah.
know these
Yeah.
days. um, so you moved to Monroe. Did y'all know you were settling here? Or was it like we're just gonna come up here for a while?
Well, we had family up here, so we
Okay.
would come visit like every Thanksgiving and some during the summer.
Yeah.
We would come visit, so we had family up here.
Hmm.
But we did not expect to settle. We
Right.
thought it was just, we're just evacuating because they're telling us to evacuate and we'll be back.
Yeah.
But I remember like watching the TV and watching what was going on and like where we lived. The levees broke, so like the water. They were my accent. The
You can.
water sat
Hey,
there
it's
for
welcome here.
the water sat there for like 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
so when my mom went back first, and then
Mhm.
she brought me back because I was a little girl, and I was like, I want to go see my room and see if I can save anything. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah,
Man, that would
it
have been
was.
hard.
Hmm.
So you end up settling here, and then what does life look like
So
moving to Monroe?
when we moved to Monroe, we instantly like very quickly got invited to church by my teacher, and I remember wanting to go. My mom kind of started having health issues, so she rarely was able to go. So I would catch a ride with like my teacher, a neighbor that went to church with us, even the children's minister.
Yeah.
But I remember having like that feeling of just wanting to be in the building and wanting
Yeah.
to learn about Jesus. And I'm 11 years old, and I have that tug for eternity already. It's
Wow.
just I can look back and be like, wow, God, you were there in every
Yeah.
moment, like calling me to you.
Makes me think of that verse, like He planted eternity in our hearts,
Mhm.
And
Yes.
it's like, it's not like that gets planted at age
Mhm.
12,
Yeah.
like it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from the beginning.
That's beautiful. Oh, you have that verse written here,
I
actually.
did. It's
Look
one
at
of
the
my
Lord.
favorite verses for that reason because I can look back and be
Yeah.
like, okay, I felt your tug at such a young age. I
Yeah.
felt that yearning for something more, for
Mm,
eternity with Him.
yeah. That's amazing. I love getting to hear parts of the story where people can look back and like see that,
Mhm.
because I think it's just so encouraging because we're not going to always see like his hands moving in the right
Mhm.
now.
Oh
Sometimes
yeah.
we do, but
Mhm.
it's almost always hindsight. But when you go back and you look at those times of like, I didn't know that then, I didn't even know him
Yeah.
then.
Mhm.
And yet I can look back and see he was there. And so I know he's
Mhm.
here now, even if it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, so tell me about your mom. She's starting to have health issues at this time, you said, unable to go to church.
So, we moved up here when I was 11, and for the next 2 years, she's kind of in and out the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
really sick. And then, her organs begin to fail, and the
Mm.
doctors cannot figure out why. And then eventually, there's nothing more that they can do or figure out how to help her. And she made the decision herself to go on comfort care because it was just a struggle for her. She was in pain constantly, in the bed constantly. Her health like really declined, and she eventually passes away when I'm 13.
Mm. Was Did she like, were her health issues connected to her cancer in any way, or did it
Hmm.
seem totally separate at the time?
They're not. She had some health issues that came from like the
Yeah,
side effects of chemo and
okay.
radiation. And I think it just kind of went downhill there. And it was like a
Yeah.
bowling ball. It just kept rolling and affecting everything.
Mm. And
Mm,
you were 13?
13 years old. So at 13 years old, I was an orphan.
How
Um,
did you how did you cope with that?
Honestly, looking back, it's really hard to like pinpoint. I can say now, like, it was like the strength of the Lord that really carried me on, but I was raised by like a really strong mother. And
Mm,
I think that that strength was like implanted in me. So it was like, you got to keep going.
mm,
But yeah, at 13 years old, I was an orphan, and that was kind of hard to process,
yeah.
even like into like college and young adult, and even into motherhood. I struggled with that, wanting
Mhm.
to belong to someone, wanting
Yeah,
to be a daughter.
yeah.
Mm.
I cannot imagine. So what did home life look like? Were you already living with your grandmother?
Yeah, so when we moved to Monroe, we
Yeah.
eventually moved in with my grandparents. My
Okay.
grandfather passed away, so it was just me, my mom, and my grandmother.
Yeah.
And after my mom passed, it was kind of a battle of who was going to raise me, and I
Mhm.
eventually ended up with her.
Yeah.
And she's in her late 70s, early 80s,
Wow.
raising me, which she got around. She was in very good health for her age,
Yeah.
but she got around very well for her age. But
Wow.
so I ended up with her, which was the best thing for me because she was able to just kind of focus on me.
Yeah.
Like all her children were out the house, it was just me
Mhm.
and her, and that's in that moment. That's really what I needed.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
What did it look like for you as a 13-year-old navigating that out in the world? Like, do you
Um,
remember having feelings towards the Lord? Like, how did your
yeah.
friendships look?
So, I really struggled with anger right
Mm,
after my mom passed because we would have so many people come over and bring us food and just come talk to us and pray with us. But I remember being angry
mm,
at 13 years old, because I would hear things like God has a plan for your life or something along those lines.
yeah.
And I would think like, what kind of God thinks this is a good plan? Like I
Mm,
don't have parents at 13 years old, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I remember feeling very angry.
Which are all really valid feelings
Mhm.
and questions. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a lot to grapple with again, like in adulthood, much
Mhm.
less as a 13-year old,
Mhm.
like whose life has been constant change
Mm.
for the last 5, 6 years,
Yeah.
towns, everything. And you know,
Mm.
now here you are. Um, so you talked about your anger. You've mentioned in that like this deep sense of belonging.
Mhm.
Um, was that like an identity that you felt
Oh yeah.
like yeah.
Um so yeah, I really struggled with my identity after this. So I began to step in the world more, not in
Mhm.
I wouldn't say not in big ways, but just kind of searching for something more than
Yeah.
what I was doing. I struggled with my identity,
Mm.
and I completely pulled away from any type of tug I felt from the Lord. I really started struggling with depression, and
Yeah.
just who I was into my teenage years, young adults, and even into motherhood. Just who was I? What was my purpose?
Yeah.
All those questions. And it was something I struggled with until I came to know the Lord.
Mm. What did that look like for you coming to know the Lord? We might be
Um,
skipping ahead, but
So when I first,
because you've known of him, right?
yes,
You've grown up,
yeah,
talked about
like,
that feeling in the church, like if,
mhm,
in some ways, like wanting to be there, like there was a tug of belonging there
mhm.
that maybe just quite hadn't set in.
So I really struggled with my identity, and I tried to pour myself, and fill that God-shaped hole with other things.
Yeah.
So it was at first it was if I can get to college and graduate, like,
Mm.
then I'll be good. If I can get a job I love, I'll be good. If I
Yeah.
can get married and have a house, I'll be good. And then it was, well, if I can become a mother, then that will really do it. And then
Right.
all those things happened,
Mm.
and that sense of wanting to belong, wanting for something more, like
Yeah.
that identity struggle, it was all still there.
Mm.
So, because it was this God shaped hole in my heart that nothing else could fill but
Right.
Him.
Right. When did you and Dustin meet?
16. And if you would have
Okay.
asked me at 6 or told me at 16 that I was going to marry my high school sweetheart, I would have been like, no, absolutely not. Because I had a plan to like get out of Monroe and go
Yeah.
do my own thing.
Yeah. So was that just this natural progression, or like did y'all start talking about marriage early? Like what did that look like
Yeah,
for y'all?
he was he jokes that he would like chase after me. He's like, I knew I was gonna marry you when I met you. He was I was like, no way. I had no interest whatsoever. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was just kind of a gradual.
But what a like and I want to draw this distinction that like marriage and no person is the end all be all. Like
Mm-hmm.
those can't be the things to fulfill us. At the same time,
Mm-hmm.
they can absolutely be blessings from the Lord. And like
Yes.
what a beautiful gift for someone whose life has
Mm-hmm.
felt unsteady, and
Mm-hmm.
has lacked a steady comfort in earthly
Mm-hmm.
places to have someone in your life starting at 16
Mm-hmm.
to this day.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a rare story.
Yeah, I always joke that the Lord he knew I needed Dustin, like, to be Dustin, because he
Yeah.
came with those qualities that I was searching. Like, I needed someone to comfort me and protect me because
Mhm.
I just didn't have those things. I had my Nana, but I was still kind of, I didn't belong. I didn't feel like I had anyone looking out for me.
Yeah.
And so when Dustin came into my life and we, like, gradually got to know
Yeah.
each other, I had that in him.
Yeah. That's so beautiful and absolutely the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so get married, you know,
Mm-hmm.
young married life, all that comes with
Have
that.
Yep, have 2 kids back to back.
I have two kids back to back. Tell me about having your boys because I know like good surprises are still surprises,
Yes.
and like tell me about that time because I know you've mentioned some postpartum depression and
Mhm.
that is a
Mhm.
big, big,
Yeah.
game changer.
So with Creed, we tried for Creed like he was planned.
Hmm.
So I did all the things. I had took all the pictures and checked how big he was, and just did all the
Hmm.
things that comes with being pregnant for the first time. And then Brooks, of course, was not part of our plan.
Hmm.
So when he came along, I mean, it's hard to say, but I was kind of detached from my pregnancy.
Mm.
I didn't check how big he was. There was no taking a picture. I have one picture of me pregnant with him. It's like when we're about to walk out the door for me to go have
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
So there was no excitement to it.
Mm.
Um, and then after I had him, like all those feelings went away. Like they
Mm.
laid him on my chest and all those feelings went away. And it was like, this was supposed to happen. You were
Yeah.
supposed to be here at this
Yeah.
time. And it's been like that ever since. He's been such a blessing. He keeps us laughing.
Yeah. Oh, it's a second born's job. They take it seriously.
Yeah.
Um, so okay. And let me just say, for all moms of two or more, like a lot of what you said is just the natural way because you are chasing someone already,
Yep.
and like you throw in any other hardship in there and like you're at max capacity,
Hmm.
And I mean, I can remember, I can remember missing a ultrasound for Garnet,
Hmm.
and like feeling so bad because, with your first, like, absolutely would got
Yeah.
there 15 minutes
Our
early and
hands
like all
aren't
the
full.
yes, but it is just very different, and then once they're
Mhm.
here, that's not the case,
Yeah.
but I do understand that. When did so you mentioned like those feelings went away after you had him.
Hmm.
So did you have postpartum leading up?
Um, I think it kind of, I don't want to call it postpartum, but I
Okay.
remember like I said, being really detached from my pregnancy.
Mhm.
And I
But not
think it
necessarily, like, depression.
yeah.
Okay.
But then after I had Brooks, I began to struggle with postpartum.
Okay.
And then 2 months after he was born, my
Yeah.
grandmother who raised me, then passed away.
Mm.
So I'm deep into grief and postpartum depression,
Yeah.
and I remember, like, having the feelings of just not wanting to go on,
Yeah.
which I felt guilty of those because I
Mm.
knew what it was like to live without, for me, 2 parents, but,
Mm.
I never want to do that to my boys. I never want my kids to experience that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Well, I wanna take, like, a moment to speak to that, like, for you, but also
Mhm.
for anyone who, like, that resonates with them,
Mhm.
because when you have depression, whether it's postpartum or another form, like, you do have those
Mhm.
feelings of despair of, like, anything would be better
It
than
is.
this,
Mhm.
and, like, I can relate, like, I had postpartum with both of my boys, and, like, can
Mhm.
relate to those feelings, and not necessarily suicidal ideation, but just, like, I don't know if I can do
Yeah,
this,
something's gotta give, yeah.
Yes, and, like, I don't know if I can do this, and, um I really learned in that season, what it meant to have self-compassion, and I think
Mm.
before that I'd been like, "Oh, that's self-help, self-care." It's not, it's accepting the compassion of the Lord for
Mm.
you,
Mhm.
like, just like you would
Mhm.
extend to someone else. It's allowing Him to minister to you in that way, and I've learned it was in counseling that I learned this, because she was like, "I feel like" I was kind of processing some of the things that, like, I felt, and she
Mhm.
was like, "I feel like what I'm hearing is shame." And I just thought, like, I kind of nodded. Then I was like, I don't really know, like, because I've always attached shame to something you've done,
Done, yeah.
which, like, I've definitely had shame over things I've done, but, like, that didn't feel like it related. And I've
Mhm.
learned, like, there are two sets of shame. There's
Mhm.
shame for things we have done, and then there's shame for ways that we feel like we shouldn't have felt.
Mm, mhm.
And, like, I learned that grace is needed when we fail,
Mhm.
but compassion is needed when we feel.
Ooh, that's
And,
good.
like, Jesus is so kind, and He understands those deep feelings. And, like, anyway, I just want to encourage you to let that guilt go,
Mhm.
because, like, that was a feeling that you had in
Mhm.
response to your surroundings that were really, really hard, but it's not what you chose.
Yeah.
And that means something,
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I think sometimes, like, being self-compassionate or allowing that self-compassion is being like, what I'm going through right now is really hard.
Yeah.
It's being able to acknowledge the hard
Yeah.
without the guilt coloring that you think it's hard. Like,
Yeah.
how dare you be ungrateful that you have two
Yeah.
boys? Well, that's not what you were. You weren't
Mhm.
ungrateful, but you were acknowledging, like, it was really hard. We
Hard.
lost your
Yeah.
grandmother, like, on top of not sleeping and having a toddler,
Yep.
But, like, that's what we do
Mhm.
as moms. Like, we think, if I don't feel total happiness and joy right
Oh,
now,
yeah.
well, then I'm failing as a mom,
Mhm.
Well, that's not true.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to speak to that because I can relate to that so much in my story. And I
Yeah.
think that that is so many mom stories.
Oh, yeah. And after, as I was walking through that grief and postpartum depression, is when I start to feel that tug of the Lord again. So I guess you can
Mm,
say that compassion and love of the Lord, like I started to feel again. There was one night I remember getting out of my bed and going searching for my Bible.
yeah.
And I was like, I knew this is what I needed. And I hadn't touched it in so long. It was at the bottom of like some random drawer,
Wow.
and going to sit at my kitchen counter and like, I know this is what I need. And I would try to read and try to pray, like, I know this
Mm.
is what I need to get through this.
Were you going to church at all during this time?
Mm-mm.
Like,
No.
just a random, like, I need to find God's
Yeah.
word.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nope, no church, no.
Yeah.
My like is like my heart knew that's what I needed.
That's crazy. Did you have, like, the familiarity or the comfort to, like, even know, like, where you wanted to turn, or was it just like, I just need anything?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was just plop it open and wherever you lead me, okay.
Yeah.
Which is when you're
Yeah.
walking through that, probably not the best thing to do because you
I
never know where you end up in there.
you know, um, I grew up in the church, but I've been in places where, like, I can remember a specific time of just, like, desperation. I had this huge decision. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and, like, that's kind of when I learned that like spiritual discernment can be different than spiritual warfare. Like I just felt a heaviness that I'd never really felt. And so I was like, oh my goodness, like, am I discerning that I'm not supposed to be going down this path,
Yeah.
and even though it was a good thing. And this was in college, and I didn't have the iPhone yet, but I had a smartphone, and it was like way smarter than me, and I didn't know how to use it. And so I was sitting somewhere where I couldn't like sign into Wi-Fi. So I had the Bible app, and like I couldn't turn anywhere else but Genesis. I was like, well, I have to start here because
Yeah.
that's all I have. But same thing, the desperation of like, I need his word so bad.
Yeah.
But it was the first time I think I was 20. It was the first time I realized that like he walked and talked with them in the garden, and they still like fell prey to Satan's schemes. And so I'm like, oh, well, then I can be going through spiritual warfare even though I'm seeking you. So hey, he works in all ways when it's his word. What did that realization of like anything that you can give me lead you to understand about his word?
Whenever I think about this time, I always go back to Hebrews 4:12 when it talks about the word of God is alive and active.
Yeah.
Because that was a moment where like the Lord was drawing me back to his light. And it really set the foundation of my love for the word today. And I've experienced like the power that his word has, like in that moment, and many times after, I've experienced like the truth of God's word transform my life.
Yeah.
So it was kind of that moment of, this is what I need. And I'm experiencing God in a different way.
Yeah. Did you leave that night and think like, okay, I'm going to read again? Or was it like, okay, I just needed that, kind of fell back into routine?
I did start reading again. And then at this moment, me and Dustin are living outside of Monroe. And eventually like everything gets hectic and we come back to Monroe. So it kind of like falls off.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like I tasted it.
Right.
So it was like when we came up here, I was like, we're going to church.
Yeah.
So we start going to church, and it was like, okay, I want more of this and more. Yeah, I eventually go on a retreat, and I remember hearing the words, like, do you belong to Jesus? Do you know that you know that you know? And in that moment, like that word belong, I was like, that was a hard one for me because I didn't belong to anyone. I was an orphan. Even being a wife and a mother, like that was still a hard word for me. So I remember thinking like, I don't know if I do. And it was in that moment that I gave my life to Christ.
Yeah. Wow. Isn't that beautiful? Like that one word, that maybe you knew in your head, maybe you didn't, but like it resonated with you in that moment.
It was like a hurtful word, and now it's not, because like I am his.
That's so good. I mean, what a testimony of the Lord working all things out for the good of those who love him, and it's like, of those who are his. I mean, your 8-year-old, 11-year-old, 13-year-old self was right that those things weren't good. Like how can those things be good? And yet in his sovereignty, he worked those things.
I truly believe if I have not walked this life, this story that God has allowed me to walk, I don't know if I would have been brought to him the way that I was, or if I was at all. Very thankful. So I can look back and think like, I'm very thankful for this life that you've given me, because it has led me here with you.
How did that how has that shaped your life since, like, not only with that sense of belonging, but even your personality? I mean, like you went through like you went through times where you're like, I wanted to be silent, like I was withdrawn, and so my mom knew to take me to counseling. How has that shaped everything for you walking with the Lord?
So, before Jesus, I was really quiet. Like when I was little, my mom put me in therapy because I stopped talking some. And then I was just kind of strangely and awkwardly quiet just throughout my life. I could sit in silence for a very long time with somebody. So the year after I received Christ, I did the whole word of the year thing.
Yeah.
And the first word that like fell in my heart was bold. And I immediately shut that down. I was like, what are you talking
Next
about?
word,
No
please,
way.
Lord.
And then the word uncomfortable came. I was like,
I'll take bold.
yeah.
I'd like
Yeah.
to sign up for my previous subscription.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, Lord, we're serious about this.
Yeah.
And this didn't look like any, I mean, there was some big things he led me to do,
Mm-hmm.
but they were all things I could not have done in my own strength. It was all
Yeah.
things that in my weakness I was able to find his strength, because these are all things like I would not have done, like Britain
Right.
without Jesus would not have done. Um yeah.
Yeah.
Is give me a sense of boldness, and like if I'm gonna speak, it's gonna be about the goodness of the Lord.
Mm,
Like
so good.
mhm.
I love that. Yeah, because you've done some teaching and stuff too,
Yeah.
right? Was
It
that a step out of your comfort zone?
big time. I was like, what are we doing
Can we
here,
define
Lord?
this as bold and uncomfortable?
Yeah. So it started with I gave my testimony on a women's retreat.
Yeah, I
And
remember that.
yeah, and it ended with after I finished my testimony, like writing it, like the Lord was tugging for something more.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a message that I just spoke, and after that it was like, okay,
Yeah.
what are we doing with this?
Yeah.
I see what you're trying to do, but are we sure?
Yeah.
But yeah, he's called me to give a few messages.
Mm.
Like I said, these are not things like Britain without the Lord
Mm.
would have done. Like
Yeah.
sitting here, Britain without the Lord, like it's not, that
Yeah.
wouldn't have happened.
Well, we're so glad, though, that you did, that you're bold and uncomfortable today.
I know.
No, I get that. I really do. Not only like is that so true, but I think it's necessary to remember and remind other people, because even people who have grown up in the church or, you know, saved at a young age, never really strayed, or whatever that looked like, can be like, well, this is just my personality. Like, it can almost be like you're set in your ways more because you're like, well, I've always walked with him like this,
Yeah.
instead of being like, well, now that I've met him, what does this look like? Like we can forget to ask that when we've walked with him for a long time. Like, what do you want from me now? That's something we should ask every year. That's why I love Word of the Year, because it's a way to kind of take inventory of like, where do you have me now? What do you want me to look at? How do you want me to lead into this year? And some people I've heard like do it on their birthday, so it's not necessarily in January, but like I personally like to do January. He doesn't always answer till February or March.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't confirm that I've heard it till February or March. Like the year that he said humble, and I was like, excuse me? Sorry, I think I didn't hear you correctly.
Yeah.
But all that to say, like, even like, I feel like sometimes I can have people assume like, oh, well, that's your personality, you're comfortable with that. Like, I am terrified to speak. Like, I mean, I've worked through a lot of things like in counseling, but like writing and speaking and podcasting are the work of the Lord, because the amount of times I've laid in bed and asked Andrew, like, should I have done that? Should I have said this, whatever, all these things, like, but I've just learned to be like, I'm holding this with open hands. Like, if you need me to be a vessel in whatever capacity, like, I want to do that. And that's that boldness of like, this is your plan. This isn't Hallie's plan. It's not Britton's plan. It's his, and like, there is so much freedom that allows us to be bold when we recognize that,
Yeah, that's exactly how it was with me. It was just kind of, okay, Lord, I'm your vessel.
Yeah.
Do with what you want with me.
Yeah.
And that led me to some things that I was like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are we sure?
This. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, okay. So tell us about 2024. Like, what does 2024 looked like?
Man, 2024. So I did the whole Word of the Year thing again this year.
Yeah.
And the word thrive and exhaust was the two words that came to me. And And I was like, okay, those are real odd words to go together.
I'd like to check off exhaust.
Yes. And I was like, yes, thrive. What is this going to look like, Lord?
Yeah.
Yes. But it wasn't in any way that I thought it was going to look. 2024 has been a hard year for me.
Yeah.
It's been one of the hardest years that I've had to walk. My marriage has been tested in ways that has never been tested anymore. My motherhood felt like it was being tested like every week.
Yeah.
Our finances, our careers, we had career changes.
Yeah.
You name it, we probably walked it this year. And it was a lot of moments of, okay, Lord, I don't know what you're doing
Yeah.
right now, but I trust you.
Not
I'm trusting
thriving.
you. Yeah, this doesn't feel like thriving, but it was my relationship with the Lord that thrived. It wasn't what I thought He was going to have me do. It was just going to be my relationship with Him. And it was a year that my faith like grew. I
Yeah.
really got to see, those characteristics of God and His goodness and His faithfulness in ways that I hadn't experienced yet. I was in a valley this whole year.
Yeah.
And just felt like one thing after another. Okay, we're going deeper and we're going deeper in this valley. But it was in that valley that I was like really to rest in His goodness and His faithfulness. So, yes, this year was exhausting, but my relationship with Him really thrived. When I hit those rocks in the soul where my roots were growing, like it was by like His strength that I was able to push past them.
I love that, like, while we can be exhausted in every way, in every capacity, spiritually, emotionally, physically,
Yes.
like, we cannot exhaust Him. We cannot exhaust the gospel. We cannot exhaust His grace. You know, they can't be exhausted, you know? And so, what a good word. I love that. Do you know what your 2025 word is going to be?
I don't. I haven't even prayed about it yet, to be honest.
Well, this area, yeah, same. I like sort of prayed about it this morning because we're recording in December, but I was like, okay, hey, I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, Lord, have you thought about this?
I know.
It's like, yeah.
I know. But definitely looking back at this year, if walking through this year, if He would have told me this is how He was going to end it, being to sit here and declare like His goodness, I'd been like, okay.
Yeah.
But, He's never surprised, even though we're kind of like, what are you doing, Lord? He's not surprised.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I think that's what's given me peace is like, okay, like I feel like one thing I learned to pray because we had a similar year in a lot of ways, like switching careers and, that naturally just makes it like your routine in marriage and family and whatever, just, you have to rework it. And so if you're not intentional about in all those areas, like it's like, I haven't seen you in a while, like we're ships in the night or whatever, or we haven't had a family night or whatever that looks like. But like in this year is when I have really learned to pray with the book, with some like house decisions and different things of being like, okay, Lord, like I don't know what Andrew and I need in a year or 10 years or, I don't know what Bear and Garnet and Finn need. Like I only know right now. I can't see the future. I don't know what we're going to encounter, but you do, and so like, no, you're not. And like, as we step through, like close the doors that are not meant for us. And now like, because I've prayed that over and over and over and like for Him to guide my hands, like as doors are open and we step through them, it's not that they're any less like daunting at times, but like there is this piece of, I know we were meant to be here. So even the hardships that we encounter, you meant for us to encounter. And you're still going to be good in those places. And like, there's just this rest in that I can't unlearn, and I'm so grateful for.
It was
So good.
definitely a year of, I really just rested in His Word a lot. I gained, like my love for the Word furthered. Like I said, my relationship with Him just thrived. And I was like, if this is what it takes for me to draw closer and closer to You, then I want to continue to experience His valleys, which probably sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But in those, like I was just able to experience Him in a new way.
I love that. Well, I can't wait to hear what your 2025 word is. Maybe whenever we post this, you can be like, "It's this."
Yeah. Yeah. He's
Well,
done some things with the last 2 years, so
yeah. Oh, yeah. He's got some
Mhm.
things up his sleeves for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing. It was so good.
Thank you for having me. It's been such an honor and privilege.
Well, the honor is ours, and I can't wait to see how it impacts people because I know it will.
Mm,
It's good. Thank you.
thank you.
And thank you so much for listening in this week. We will see you next week on The Saltworks.
This is my story. This is your story.